rebels against Gaddafi. I'm sorry, but it's not true. And there's been a campaign in the British media. The Times newspaper has led it for a month. The Times newspaper, day after day after day, hammered the need for Western intervention in Libya. It used all the tricks, the atrocity stories. It ran a story on its front page with a single source, a single Libyan source, that African mercenaries, black African mercenaries, drunk, had been taking Viagra and raping men, the male rebels. Have you seen that anywhere else? No. You'll have seen it on the front page of the Times. We have no way of knowing whether it's true. Also focusing on the tragic women and children victims amongst the rebel population. We know nothing about the other side. We've been sold the London Evening Standard. If you're unfortunate enough to live in London, as I do, London Evening Standard has also run a campaign for Western intervention in Libya, using exactly the same tactics. And oh my goodness, I've just run out of. Yeah, okay. Let's go through it. Let's go through the myths, right? That the opposition is defenseless. The opposition is defenseless. If you read between the lines, you'll know that the operation has liberated massive arms dumps. It has tanks. Only in today's papers it reported how NATO actually blew up, attacked a rebel tank column in Libya yesterday. It has, or at least it had, fighter planes. Tragically, the rebels shot down 2 of their own fighter planes. These are people who do have weapons. They are capable of defending themselves. They are capable of organising. They liberated Benghazi, for God's sake. It's Libya's second city. And yet we're being presented this image of the rebels as being all over the place, a bit useless, a bit disorganised. They're going off in their jeeps and then turning around and come back again. I'd like to see a single British journalist, actually Aura Guerin, bravely has gone with the rebels. And her reports are excellent. There's been some excellent reporting. But in fact, a lot of the British media, from their armchairs, are accusing these feckless Arabs of not being very good at fighting for a revolution. They don't know. We don't know anything about it. Another myth has been about the mass. Well, it's not. Something that's been sold to us is that there's been a huge massacre taking place by the Gaddafi forces. Actually, we don't know. There's a very interesting piece early on in early March in the Guardian by the Guardian's correspondent Peter Bowman, pointing out that there were these breathless reports about savage massacres and killings and so on. And he'd been there to check them out, and he couldn't find any evidence. He couldn't find the evidence. Now, we know that Gaddafi is a brutal dictator, that we know that he's going to use. He wants to drown this uprising in blood. But at the same time, we have to be clear that the British media has buttered up the British population to back this war. And the first casualty of war is the truth, and the truth is what is being massacred in the British papers. And you've seen it since the beginning of the NATO intervention, that they announced that a suicide aircraft had killed Hassim Gaddafi, Gaddafi's second son. A few days later, Hassim Gaddafi popped up on the Libyan TV. I'm all right. That was all over the British press. So, what are the real motives for this? Alistair's talked a fair bit about it. But can we really trust the French, whose first reaction to the Tunisian uprising was to say to the leadership, you can rely on our experience in putting down rebellions? Can we really trust the Italians? The Italians have got a dozen fighter aircraft at work. The 25% of Italian oil comes from Libya. The Italians killed 100,000 Libyans during their occupation of the country during the colonial period in the first half of the last century. Can we really trust the British when Cameron, when he went to the Middle East after the Egyptian uprising, took with him, who did he take with him? A delegation of arms manufacturers because he wants to sell arms to the Middle East. We cannot in any way take this simplistic motive that we're in there to defend the rebels at face value. And what this is about is reasserting Western control over the Arab Spring. The good thing about it is that they're so divided about it. You know, you can see the right is divided. People like Boris Johnson in the Telegraph, that they're asking all sorts, you know, what are we letting ourselves in for? And actually they're right to ask those questions because we're seeing the British intervention stepping up. It's getting bigger and bigger. Yesterday's papers were talking about a British plan for Arab countries to pay for British mercenaries to go in and fight on the rebel side. This is British boots on the ground, not part of the army, but that's what it's about. This is about escalating British intervention. And actually the intelligent liberals who supported the initial bombing, the initial no-fly zone, are now asking, well, we should stop it. We've taken out the Air Force, that's what we went in for. We should stop it and leave it. Why are we carrying on? It's because the real motives are much more about the West reasserting control over its colonial backyard, stamping its control, putting conditions on the uprising in Libya. Incredibly, yesterday's paper is reporting that British envoys had demanded from the rebels in Benghazi that the rebels apologise for the Lockerbie bombing. And this is about imposing Western control, saying if you don't do this, that and the other, we are not going to arm you, bomb Gaddafi, blah, blah, blah. You know, the horrible situation in Misrata is being held up to the Libyan rebels and saying, you know, if you don't do what we want you to do, we're going to let your people suffer in Misrata. And in fact, the situation in Misrata shows the uselessness, the pointlessness of trying to solve this problem with fighter planes and bombs. Because Gaddafi's side, they've just modified their tactics, and now they are effectively moving in on Misrata. We have to demand the end of NATO military intervention. I should say something about my paper, finish on this, that the Financial Times has sadly has been very hard line in supporting the NATO intervention. But then the key leader, the main leader writer on the paper, who's writing all these leaders, was at Cambridge with Cameron. It was in the Bullingdon Club together with Cameron. So draw your own conclusion.
Thank you very much. So it seems that the argument is that the prime motive for intervention in Libya is to manage the Arab revolution, to ensure that whatever group takes power will still support Western interests. Now, I'll take questions now. I'll have 2 or 3 at a time before we answer them. Any questions?